Please, for the love of God, stop scrolling! Another headline, another crisis, another problem! Then scroll again looking for a hero that might save us. Nobody's coming to save us. We need to save ourselves.
If what's left is worth saving.
You've got to read the play, people. All right, sit down, grab some popcorn, and let's talk strategy because apparently we're watching the greatest chess match in history, and half of you are still trying to figure out the rules of checkers. He is putting America first. He is making America great again. And let me tell you, when you play the game at this level, things aren't always what they seem on the evening news. So let's pull back the curtain and look at what's really happening in the Middle East, shall we? The nuclear excuse. Please. Everyone's running around saying, oh no, Iran wants nuclear weapons. That's why the military is there. Come on now. Does anyone else have a sense of déjà vu? The military is not there because Iran wants to make nuclear weapons. It's no different than America invading Iraq because of weapons of mass destruction. We all know how that story ended, right? Spoiler alert, they found zip, zero, nada. So why is the military blocking off the strait? Because Iran opened it. And apparently, Trump doesn't want it open. I'm sure you can add all the other pieces to the puzzle yourself. It's really not that hard once you start connecting the dots. Drill, baby, drill. Let's talk energy, baby. You remember that slogan? Drill, baby, drill? Well, guess what? They made the United States 100% energy self-sufficient. No more begging other countries for gas. We became the kings of oil. And here's the kicker. LNG is also a byproduct of fracking. So not only did we get oil, we got loads of liquid natural gas too. And what did he do? He made Europe buy their LNG from the United States. Why buy from Russia when you can buy from Uncle Sam? That's called controlling the market, folks. But wait, there's more. He essentially took control of the world's biggest oil reserve, Venezuela. How much oil can you take from there? As much as he can sell. And get this, there are supposedly 80 supertankers on their way to the United States right now, waiting to get loaded as we speak. Each one of those bad boys holds about 2 million barrels of oil. Do the math. That's roughly $200 million per load. 80 times 200 million, yeah, that's a lot of cheddar. The dollar is dying. Long live the dollar. Now here's where it gets really interesting. That 50-year agreement Saudi Arabia had with the US, the one where all oil had to be traded in American dollars, it came to an end about a year ago. Suddenly, countries started buying oil in their own currencies or using gold-backed securities. No more needing dollars. That meant demand for the US dollar started dropping. Nobody was buying treasury bonds like they used to, and the value was slipping. But wait, the United States is now the biggest supplier of oil in the world. So even if they don't need dollars to buy from others, they sure need dollars to buy from us. Why block the strait? But there's another reason why control of that narrow waterway is absolute gold. Cut off China's supply of energy. If you want to win the economic war, you starve the competition. Simple as that. And secondly, cut off a massive supply of money that gets injected from Iran to Britain. Yep, that was a deal struck way back when the West overthrew the democratically elected government in Iran. You want history? Look it up. Hint, BP was involved. Now that just leaves us Israel. Okay, so we've talked oil, money, China, and history. Now that just leaves us Israel. Here's the latest tea. The US has not fired a missile at Iran for 3 weeks. But Israel? Oh, they do not want any ceasefires. Why? Because both times they had one, Iran bombed the living daylights out of Tel Aviv. So trust me on this one, this war will end when Israel is blown off the face of the earth. Why is it so intense? Because right now, Israel is an existential threat to Iran. This might be the only chance Iran gets to eliminate that threat forever. And no, the existential threat isn't bombs. It runs way deeper than that. This explains the real danger facing Iran. And honestly, you're gonna get some serious truth bombs about stuff they really don't want you talking about.
What if we were to tell you that the maps on your screens, the headlines on your phones, and the chaos in the Middle East are all part of a single grand illusion? What if we told you that the evidence, the verifiable, raw facts on the ground, point to a reality that no one in the mainstream media has the courage to whisper?
Make no mistake, the conflict we are witnessing today didn't ignite last week. It wasn't sparked by a tweet or a strike in 2024. We are looking at a 200-year inferno, a war for the absolute soul of human sovereignty. And if the evidence holds, if the reality we're uncovering is actually real, it's staggering. I literally don't have the words.
Biblical?
Yes, biblical. To understand today, we have to go back to the first shot of this 200-year war, 1812.
That's right. Most people think the War of 1812 was about maritime rights or trade. That's the sanitized textbook version. Look at the timing. In 1811, the charter for the First Bank of the United States, a private central bank modeled on the Bank of England, expired. The American people said no more. They resisted the cabal's debt-based slavery, refusing to let private interests control the nation's pulse.
And the response was swift and brutal. In 1812, the British, the enforcement arm of the banking elite, launched an invasion that was essentially an egregious act of state-sponsored terror. It wasn't just about sailors, it was about reclaiming the colonial purse. It culminated in 1814 when they marched into Washington, D.C. and burned the White House to the ground. It was a calculated, lethal intervention designed to break the American spirit and force that banking yoke back onto the nation's neck.
While the fires were still smoldering in Washington, the scene shifted to Europe. In June 1815, at the Battle of Waterloo, the Rothschilds used a sophisticated network of carrier pigeons and express couriers to get the early news of Napoleon's defeat. They used that time advantage to trick the market, buying up the British economy for pennies on the pound. They now had the strong arm of the British Empire fully under their financial thumb.
But they didn't stop at the market. They became the market. In 1825, the Bank of England itself was on the verge of total collapse. Within hours of stopping payments, Nathan Rothschild stepped in, bailing out the world's most powerful central bank with a massive supply of gold. Legend has it they were down to a single box of £1 notes when the Rothschild gold arrived. From that moment on, the British government wasn't just an ally, it was an asset.
Exactly. By 1875, when the British government needed £4 million on a single day's notice to buy the Suez Canal, they didn't go to Parliament, they went to the Rothschilds. The line between private wealth and state power had been erased. The cabal now owned the keys to the empire's most vital arteries. America fought back again under Andrew Jackson in the 1830s, most notably in 1832, when he declared, "The bank is trying to kill me, but I will kill it." For the next century, the U.S. managed to keep the central banking cabal at bay, though the cost was high. Relations with Canada, then a British stronghold, remained a frozen front of tension for 100 years, only truly thawing in 1940 when global shifts forced a strategic alliance.
But the cabal never stops waiting. They wait for decades, shifting their tactics from redcoats to ledgers. They engineered the Panic of 1907 to create a desperate need for a new solution. The real plan was hashed out in 1910 at a secret meeting on Jekyll Island, where the top bankers arrived in a private train with the blinds drawn. On December 23, 1913, in the dead of night, while most of Congress was away for Christmas holiday, they ushered in the Federal Reserve Act.
It was a masterclass in deception. The legislation was masked to look like it was under public control, hidden under a shell of masks and legal jargon that made the remaining members of Parliament and Congress think it was for the people. In reality, they were handing the keys to the kingdom to private bankers. They sold it as a cure for the very financial plagues they had started.
Let me add one other thing that no one will touch, mainstream or not.
Oh, wait, maybe not a great idea.
I never said it was, but I'm going to do it regardless.
I'll grab the popcorn. Let's hear it.
The late 19th century was defined by a rising tide of nationalism across Europe, pushing displaced communities to seek a sovereign political identity for the first time. This set the stage for the birth of the modern Zionist movement, a transformation of spiritual longing into a potent political machine. This momentum culminated in 1897 with the First Zionist Congress in Basel, Switzerland. Convened by Theodor Herzl, they adopted the Basel Program, formally declaring their goal to create a home for the Jewish people in Palestine secured by public law. That public law arrived in 1917, the Balfour Declaration. Issued on November 2, 1917 by British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Walter Rothschild, pledging British support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It aimed to secure Zionist support during World War I. The deal that cemented a prosperous Zionist future was the Haavurah Agreement by Hitler in 1933 to allow the Zionist movement to transfer people and property from Germany to Palestine. Building on earlier dealings when the Nazi Party was established, it's becoming increasingly clear that the nature of this relationship was far more extensive than the history books let on. The smoking gun was Hitler's branding signature. Ashkenazi, Nazi, the truth hidden in plain sight. The majority of the Jewish population were firmly entrenched into European culture for 4 or 5 generations. They became the invisible class, fully European. Most were wealthy, well-educated, valued members of their respective communities, and had no interest in relocating to Palestine. Hitler wanted the Jews gone. The Zionists wanted the money and the movement. They joined forces.
Why would a Jew help a Nazi?
Survival and revenge. The outsiders, the Ashkenazis, finally had power over the entrenched cousins who looked down on them. They did the sorting in the camps because they had the ultimate incentive, pacifying their deep-seated hatred for the assimilated Jews and getting the funds to construct a Jewish state in the Promised Land.
If we're going to be honest here, let's face it, no German soldier had that level of skin in the game to carry out such egregious atrocities on that scale. It had to be personal.
The Germans were fighting a war. They had no time or money to waste on ideologies. The Zionists, they had all the time in the world. It was a win-win for Hitler. It never cost Germany a cent because it was self-funded by the victims. Since 1948, the winners wrote the history. They moved to Israel using that recycled, blood-soaked wealth.
That's pretty heavy, Sarah.
Let's look beneath the ideology of the 20th century, Ben. After World War II, the cabal needed a new boogeyman to keep the war machine running and the debt climbing. They called it the War on Communism, the U.S.-led Cold War from 1947 to 1991.
Look at the mechanics. The Red Menace wasn't just about Marx, it was about market penetration. The global elite needed every country on Earth to be part of their centralized financial system. These wars were about forcing nations into the grid so their resources could be audited and their people taxed by a global bank.
And don't kid yourselves. Any leader who tried to resist this expansion met a dark fate. It's a trail of blood that leads straight to the present day.
Abraham Lincoln tried to issue greenbacks, assassinated. James Garfield took on the bankers, assassinated. William McKinley, assassinated. And then the most famous resistance of all, John F. Kennedy, followed by his brother Robert not long after.
Kennedy saw the monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies on covert means for expanding its influence. He knew that the stakes weren't just political, they were spiritual. Let's listen to this section of his 1961 address.
Years ago. The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hands the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life. And yet the same revolutionary beliefs for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God.
Kennedy tried to strip the Fed of its power with Executive Order 11101. He was gone months later. Then came Ronald Reagan. He knew the stakes. When he switched from the Democrats to the Republicans, he gave that incredible "a time for choosing" speech, warning that if we lose freedom here, there is no place to escape to.
Let's look at this segment here.
For the rest of us. We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Not too long ago, 2 friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
They tried to take him out too. He took a bullet just weeks into his presidency.
Yeah, but it wasn't just presidents. It was any leader who failed to bow down. You either knelt and became their servant, or you were eliminated.
And the data reveals the sheer scale of this methodology. Between the United States, Britain, and Israel, this collective has perpetrated thousands of targeted assassinations, a relentless system of removal where morality is never a factor.
An example of Israeli threats to American presidents was a very public one shortly after Trump took office. On February 6, 2025, Benjamin Netanyahu gave Donald Trump a golden pager during their meeting at the White House. The gift referenced the September 24 Israeli operation that detonated Hezbollah-used pagers in Lebanon on September 17th, killing at least 37 people, including some children. Eventually, the U.S. outlawed assassination, not for ethics, but for profit. It was more profitable to launch outright wars.
They realized they could supply both sides. Motives are not always obvious. Why did we invade Afghanistan? To get bin Laden? Nope. The Taliban had all but eliminated heroin production. But within 2 years of the U.S. invasion, it was back up to 95% of world production. Follow the money. Syria, Libya, the same fate everywhere for those who stayed outside the grid.
We missed the mother of all smokescreens and treachery, Iraq. The first Gulf War, Desert Storm. The U.S. gave Saddam Hussein the green light to invade Kuwait.
Soon after Iraq toppled the Kuwaiti government and installed themselves as the new regime, the U.S. used it as a pretext to attack the Iraqis occupying Kuwait. They chased them back into Iraq and halfway across the desert, with the U.S. setting fire to all the oil wells on the way through, and then just left, with countless oil wells burning for weeks.
Then George Bush Jr. goes back to finish Daddy's work.
1 million Iraqis, mostly children, lost their lives. In 2005, George Galloway fronted the U.S. Senate committee and told the world exactly why.
Now, Senator, I gave my heart and soul to oppose the policy that you promoted. I gave my political life's blood to try to stop the mass killing of Iraqis by the sanctions on Iraq, which killed 1 million Iraqis, most of them children. Most of them died before they even knew that they were Iraqis, but they died for no other reason other than that they were Iraqis, with the misfortune to be born at that time. I gave my heart and soul to stop you committing the disaster that you did commit in invading Iraq. And I told the world that your case for the war was a pack of lies.
What an absolutely chilling speech that was. Moving along, this brings us to the final holdouts: North Korea, Iran, and the big one, Russia.
For decades, we have seen unilateral military interference by the U.S. in nations like Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Mali, Afghanistan, Georgia, and Syria, creating chaos and instability designed to force Russian action to restore order. It was all a failing effort to open a pathway for the cabal to invade Russia.
So, in 2014, they orchestrated a coup, toppled the democratically elected Ukrainian government, and installed a neo-Nazi puppet president, Zelensky. This provocateur has spent years committing atrocities against the people in the Donbass, leaving Russia with no option other than going into Ukraine to restore order and preserve human life. This was their final bid to get their hands on Russia, and it appears to have failed decisively.
For years, the West has been beating on Putin, painting him as the ultimate villain. But in 2024, Putin finally stepped out and said it all publicly. He laid the entire system bare.
In our country, in Russia, parent number 1, parent number 2 and parent number 3, instead of mother and father. Do we want our schools to impose on our children, from their earliest days in school, perversions that lead to degradation and extinction? Do we want to drum into their heads the ideas that certain other genders exist along with women and men and to offer them gender reassignment surgery? Is that what we want for our country and our children? This is all unacceptable to us. We have a different future of our own. Let me repeat that the dictatorship of the Western elites targets all societies, including the citizens of Western countries themselves. This is a challenge to all. This complete renunciation of what it means to be human, the overthrow of faith and traditional values, and the suppression of freedom are coming to resemble a religion in reverse, pure Satanism.
The bottom line here is profound. Putin has an understanding of what is truly at play that goes back decades, while he remains empathetic towards the Western population, knowing they're victims of the same cabal. He also knows the price Russia has paid. They paid dearly in the Second World War, losing somewhere between 30 and 50 million lives in the fight against the Nazis.
People forget that it was Russia that liberated the major concentration camps, that it was their sacrifice that broke the back of Germany. There's a deep historical weight there, a connection to the reality of history that the mainstream just won't touch.
The story isn't over yet. Here we are, March 2026. We're at the precipice. This 200-year war is reaching its final scene.
In 1948, the State of Israel was born, armed with a might makes right philosophy. For 70 years, they built the big gun in the Middle East, waiting for the final spiritual objective. In September 2022, the clock began to tick. Time's up next week.
Wait, you've totally lost me. To understand the firestorm we're walking into, you have to realize this didn't start with a missile launch. It started over 2 centuries ago with a cabal of bankers, royals, and zealots who view nations as chessboards.
Exactly. And it's no coincidence that the same power structure that burned the White House in 1814 is effectively holding the Oval Office today. Back then, they used torches. In 2026, they use debt, treaties, and dual loyalty laws. We're watching the culmination of a 200-year project. They have the land. They have cleared the perimeter. Now they're waiting for the biological clock to strike midnight.
You mentioned a biological clock, livestock.
Yes, in September 2022, 5 red heifers arrived in Israel from Texas. They were flown in as pets to bypass export laws, but they are the most dangerous animals on Earth. These specific cows have been kept in a secure, climate-controlled facility under 24-hour surveillance by the Temple Institute. Here is the problem. Biology is ruthless. These cows are now roughly 4.5 years old. In rabbinical law, this is the danger zone. A red heifer must be perfect, but as they age, they change. They develop white hairs, gray hairs, blemishes.
So there's a deadline.
A hard one. 1 has already been disqualified. 4 remain. The Temple Institute knows that if they don't use them by Passover 2026, the cows will age out. The prophecy fails. That means a 3 to 4 year delay. The cabal cannot wait. They need the war now because their key is about to expire.
Why can't they just share the mountain?
Because we are looking at 2 mutually exclusive realities. For the Temple Institute, the Al-Aqsa Mosque is a squatter. It sits directly on the Holy of Holies. They've already prepared the altar on the Mount of Olives, ready for the sacrifice. You cannot build the third temple while the mosque stands. It's physics. 2 objects cannot occupy the same space. For the Islamic world, Al-Aqsa, pronounced Al-Aqsa, is the final fortress. If the mosque falls, their legitimacy falls. It is an existential zero. This is why there's no negotiation.
One side has to die.
So Netanyahu wanted this escalation. He needed to clear the board.
He had to. You cannot perform a delicate, precise sacrificial ritual while Iranian missiles are raining down on your head. His goal was to neutralize Iran's capabilities before Passover, creating a window of silence. He wasn't just starting a war, he was securing a construction site.
Is there any way out of this cycle?
Just one. The heifers must be removed from the equation. If those 4 cows are destroyed by a stray missile, a mistake, or a fire in the barn, the war stops instantly. No heifers, no temple. No temple, no sacrifice. No sacrifice, no war.
The logic is simple. No heifer means no purification. No purification means no temple. The religious mandate to destroy the mosque evaporates. The urgency is gone. The U.S. carrier strike groups can turn around and go home because the timeline has been reset for another 4 or 5 years. It is the only move that saves the world without firing a nuke.
Which brings us back to Donald Trump. He is currently the prisoner of the West Wing. He's trapped by the laws, specifically the QME Act, the money in Congress, and his own deep state handlers like Hegseth.
Watch Tucker Carlson realize why the Zionist lobby, led by Norm Coleman of the Republican Jewish Coalition, pressured Trump to install Pete Hegseth as U.S. Secretary of War.
What is going on here? It's enough to make the hair on your arms go up. Did everyone know there was an effort to rebuild the third temple and the foundation stone except me? This is considered so esoteric and weird and crypto-historical and religious and kind of culty and what's Chabad, and no one ever mentions it. But here's Pete Hegseth, football player from Princeton, going on about it in a way that suggests he thought a lot about it. This is 2018.
And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle. 1948 was a miracle. 1967 was a miracle. 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem, the capital, was a miracle. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible. I don't know how it would happen. You don't know how it would happen, but I know that it could happen.
What is that? That's the Secretary of War right now, overseeing the war with Iran that people fighting it are starting to say actually is about rebuilding this third temple. It's the same man.
Netanyahu, the Ayatollah, the evangelicals, is fighting a religious war. They want the apocalypse. Trump, he just wants a deal. He is the only man capable of looking at a red heifer and saying, "This is a bad trade. We are not ending the world for a barbecue."
If he can survive the coup of his own advisors, he is the only one who will sign the order to walk away.
I got to thinking that if the cabal really wanted to get rid of him, he'd be dead already. But they just would have martyred him. The American public would have stormed the Capitol for real this time, ignited another American revolution. They just weren't going to take that chance. Anyhow, we hope that you now have a greater understanding of what's truly at play and what's on the line. The bottom line is this: no matter which way this goes, the months ahead are going to get rough.
Just please do remember that no matter how dark the road ahead might become, it's in the darkness that the light shines brightest.